Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to look at how to use Anime Studio version 11. Just so you know, it's not quite the newest version. The newest version of the software, for whatever reason, stopped using the Anime Studio naming convention and has been renamed Moho for some reason. But this version is still available. As of recording, it's available at Amazon as a digital download. It's $27 the last time I checked, so really inexpensive if you're looking to start dabbling in animation and see if it's something that you like doing. So having said that, let's get into the actual tutorial. So to understand how Anime Studio works and how it is so versatile, it's not that it has a deep tool set. It does have some tools, but the key is that it uses vectors. So in short, what you're doing is even when you draw a line, what you've actually done is you've drawn several points and Anime Studio in real time draws the line for you. This is really important to understand how Anime Studio works because that is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be manipulating points. So if you're the kind of artist who likes to draw everything freehand, Anime Studio might not be your cup of tea, but that's what this tutorial is here for, so you can see what it's like before you buy it. So yeah, that's what you're going to be doing for the most part is you're going to be manipulating the location of points. So if you don't like a line, you don't have to erase it. You can just move the points. If you think the line is too thick or thin, you don't have to redraw it. You can just change the thickness. Again, there's tools that do that. So that will all make more sense once we get into the actual project. I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. Keep that in the back of your mind. That is what drives Anime Studio, is those vectors, those points that you're designating. Okay, so quick UI overview. In the upper left corner here, we have the tool menu. We'll get into that in just a few minutes, but this is where you have your layer tools, your paint tools, your draw tools, that kind of thing. Upper right corner, we have the color picker, and you can also choose effects for when you're painting with the paint can tool. Here, if you've used any kind of illustration or drawing program, you would be familiar with layers, and that is you don't draw everything in one layer, you can break it down into multiple layers. In the bottom is the timeline. We'll get into how that works at the end of the tutorial. Okay, so that's the overview of the UI. So let's start drawing and look at some of these tools. Now, this is the freehand tool, and this is what I was mentioning. You can use this, but you're probably only going to use it for certain limited circumstances. So let's just draw a line, just kind of a curved line from one side to the other. Now, it's a little bit hard to see, but there are these red dots. This is what I was talking about. You drew a line, but what you actually did is you designated these points, and Anime Studio is drawing the line for you. Now, this is why this is so powerful, because what if you said, gee, I didn't want it to quite curve like this? Well, we have a move tool. We click on that dot, and there you go. No more having to erase. You just move the dot to where you want it to be. So again, it's more of a technical approach to drawing as opposed to just freehand. So decide for yourself whether or not you like that. So, and one of the other reasons why you wouldn't use the freehand tool is obviously if you have all these dots and you have these real-time calculations going on, the more dots, the more vectors, the more resource intensive the image becomes. Now, I don't want you to think that you can only have like a couple hundred dots. You can have like thousands of these vectors and be okay, but at a certain point it does build up, particularly if you're doing a freehand, because this curve, which uses, oops, sorry, let's undo that. Let's grab the select tool. Just like other drawing programs, you could just left click to select. Looks like we got something like 10, 11, 12 dots. Okay, so let's delete that, just hitting delete on the keyboard. And now we'll look at a new tool. This is the add point tool. So left click, hold, drag, let go. I drew a point. Left click on that point, hold, let go, made another point. Left click, drag, let go. We now have a line that's very similar and only uses 1, 2, 3, 4 points. So the other one used whatever, like a dozen points. This one only used 4, and you can also notice it is far, far smoother. So when would you use the freehand tool? When you want something really erratic, like maybe if someone has like kind of frizzy hair, or maybe you're trying to look for something that just looks kind of noisy in general. But generally, if you're drawing the rest of a person, like their face or whatever, you're probably not going to use the freehand tool because it makes it very, very messy. That in the case of Anime Studio, sometimes less is more. Less dots, both is less resource intensive and gives you just much smoother curve. So we're going to select that and delete it. Let's go to the Shape tool. So just like Unity, I have a complaint in that it doesn't give us enough predetermined shapes, but they give us a few. So rectangle, left click, let go, you go to rectangle. You can choose the circle, you can make a circle, you can make it oval, okay? Triangle, no big surprise, it's a triangle, star, so on and so forth. Now, if you notice, and I should have mentioned this sooner, see this rectangle? This is what actually gets drawn. So anything that's outside of that won't get drawn. So I'm going to do a quick draw, a quick preview, and you'll see that that gets cut off. So to actually draw a still image, you go to File, you go to Preview, and see, this gets cuts off. So this border matches this, and it is quite accurate. If not, it wouldn't be terribly useful. Now you can draw things outside of this area because maybe you want to move into the area, but at any given time, all that gets drawn in a frame is in that area. And by the way, that zoom I just did, that's just the scroll wheel, which is also pretty basic, or typical, I should say. So we're just going to select that and delete it. And then there is actually, let's draw another shape. We'll go back to that. We'll draw a circle. And we'll do that to show the paint can. So you can select a color. So you can click on, say, green, and then you just paint like a regular paint program. Okay. And like I said, there's different styles. I won't get into those. Those are a little bit problematic when you start animating because the pattern itself doesn't necessarily animate and is static. So use those with caution. I'm not saying that it can't be done. It's just it takes greater work to make it be effective. Let's look at the line tool. I mentioned this at the beginning that you can change the thickness of a line. You can make it really thin, really thick. There's many different reasons why you would do this. I haven't gotten into layers yet, but you can create the different effects for different layers. So you can make a layer be translucent. You can also give a blur. So if you have a really thick outline like this, maybe you'd make the outline be white or yellow. You set the layer to have a blur, and then suddenly this becomes like a halo or a glow. So there are reasons why you would have a very thick border, and that's just one example. Let's just delete that. There is a layer tool. This just slides around layers. It really isn't, it's very, very useful, but I really can't demonstrate it when we only have one layer. There's not much to demonstrate. Similar to layer, there's a camera. Think of it this way. The camera will move the entire image. So maybe for some reason the whole thing is offset and you don't want to go into each and every layer and move everything. You can just take the camera and the whole thing moves. So layer will move one layer. Camera effectively moves all the layers at the same time, at least from the point of view of what's being drawn. And I think that's about it for the basic tools. There's a few others we'll go into as we get into an actual project, but you really need to be in a project for it to make sense. So that's the basic tool overview. Now let's get into animation. So for animation, the way it works, by default, you start at the 0 frame. What you do is you will create keyframes, and then Anime Studio does all the in-between frames for you. So whereas in a more hand-drawn environment, you would have a lead artist draw the keyframes, and then it's handed off to someone else to draw the in-between frames, and even that process is probably broken up to between the people who are doing the outlines and the people who are doing the actual painting. But again, it's the core concept that you have keyframes that define like beginning and end points of an animation motion, and then Anime Studio does all the in-between frames for you. So let's use the shape tool. We've got the circle, and we're just going to draw a smiley face. Now we're going to take our select tool, just select it, take our move tool, and I'm not going to keep saying that because these are pretty basic concepts. And again, I mean that as far as used in other illustration programs, the idea to select and the idea to move. So we take our paint can, and we're just going to make this, say, like a green. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our shape tool. We're going to make a couple eyes. You also can copy a shape, like we want the eyes to be the same size, so we'll just select, edit, copy, paste, and now we have two eyes. As far as what is on top, it's done in the order of being drawn. So this was drawn first, these were drawn next, so these will automatically be on top. So if you ever have an issue with something's not on top like you want it to be, you can either copy and paste it, or you can just create another layer. Now what we're going to do is we are going to use the, well, actually no, we'll use the add point tool. I was going to use the pen tool, but we'll use the smile. We'll use to make this. We're going to make a smile. We'll use this tool. So we're just going to left click, draw, let go, left click on that dot, let go. And now what we do is we want to paint that line. So we go to the paint can, and we're going to do stroke. So that's the line that we want painted. So now we just click on that with our paint can, and now it's been painted. We'll select that, and we'll move it. Oops, sorry. I'll explain in a second why that happened. When you select an object, you see this double triangle appear around it. These are control points. If you're pointing at a control point, there's several things you can do. Like this resizes it. It's like a double arrow. So like if I did that, resizes it. If you see the plus sign in the middle, that just means move. And if you're in this rectangle, it's rotate. So I probably should have reviewed that with the tools, but now we've reviewed it. So we're just going to move this again, look for the plus sign. So he doesn't look too happy, but that's okay. It's Saturday morning. He's about to get happier. Okay, so again, Anime Studio is based on using the vectors, using these points. So there are three basic ways that you're going to animate. Depending on what you're trying to do, you're going to use one or a combination of these methods. They're not mutually exclusive. And again, it all depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get like a shape to deform because it's very complex, you're probably going to use this method where you move points. And I'll get into the other two methods shortly. So what we're going to do, so we're drawing at the 0 frame. Like I said, you're going to create a keyframe. The way you create a keyframe is you move. Say you want this to happen over 24 frames. Now what you do is you take that point and you move it. Now it's important to know that each tool has its own animation control. And I'll get more into what that means in a minute. But if you want something to not change or you want something to change, you have to make sure that you're changing that specific attribute. Like for instance, I moved the point, but this looks kind of weird. So I could use this tool, which let you either make something more curved or more pointed. So if I left click and I drag left, becomes more pointed, kind of makes them birdish. Or you can right click and it makes it more curvy, and that's what it's going for. So now at this keyframe, two different things are happening. This point is being moved and its curvature is changing. And like I said, all these in-between frames will be drawn automatically. So if we move this over, see how it changes in real time? So here indicates what frames will be drawn. We said we're only going off to frame 24. And now let's just play. And he smiles. And just like that, you've done your first animation. You've done an animation by moving points. Now, there is a second way to animate, and you can do some deforming with it, but it's more if you're trying to do if you want objects that are dependent upon each other. If you think of like how 3D modeling software works and you have like a skeletal system, well, Anime Studio uses one as well. It uses a basic bone rigging system. So let's look at that now. So the first thing to know about using bones is that they are in their own layer. And what happens is any layer attached to the bone layer will be affected by whatever kind of movement or manipulation is occurring to the bones. So say I drawn the face 3 different layers for some reason. The head, the eyes, the mouth, they were all their own layers. I don't have to combine them to have the bones make them move in a synchronized manner. I would just link all the layers to the bone. You don't have to like manually combine them. You'll see in a second. Okay, so let's create a bone layer. We click on this, we click on bone, and right now it does nothing. You'd actually have to link the layer to this. So let's go ahead, drag it, and now it's indented, so now this is a child to that. We're also going to make a few other changes, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have them do like a spin, like a happy spin. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the camera tool. I mentioned it, but we didn't use it. You can track like left and right. You can zoom in and out, and these can be done during the animation cycle as well. But for now, we're making this change on the 0 frame. We're just going to zoom out. And let's track down a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have them do a 360. So let's go to our bone layer. And now you have new tools when you're in the bone layer. We're going to add a bone. Make it basically dead center. And then we move to our keyframe. We're going to use the same keyframe. We take the transform tool, and you're going to see the similar kind of abilities that you did for when you've selected a point, and that is the ability to move with the plus sign, rotate with the circle. You can also come down here and scale. So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate. So again, you're making a keyframe here, and so we're just going to rotate them. All right, and now you can immediately see if it works just by going along the timeline. Sure enough, he does a spin, but he's still kind of clipping off at the top. We don't need as much space at the bottom, so again, at the 0 frame, we'll click on camera, track him to the bottom. There we go. Now, this is a very simple demonstration. You could say, well, why even bother? It would be very difficult to make this work from a point. You'd have to select every single point, and then you couldn't just rotate it in place like that if you wanted to do like that. You'd have to create a whole bunch of other keyframes. And you also worry about distortion and things like that. Okay? And so what we do now is we'll just run this. Okay? Let's go back to the 0 frame, and now we're going to do one more thing. As I said, you can use the camera. You can also move a layer. So this is really the third type of animation. I suppose you could add the panning as far as another type of animation, but that really doesn't manipulate the shape. You could technically manipulate a shape by moving just one layer. So let's see how that works. So we're at the 0 frame. We're just going to slide this fellow over. And we're going to come over to 24. And then we're just going to slide him over. You can even see how it's creating the points. And each of these points you can manipulate as well. So now he's kind of doing a jump because he was spinning in place. Now he's jumping. So sometimes you might get unexpected combinations when you're using these different ways of animating. So like I said, these are not mutually exclusive. We've done 3 different types of animation. We did a point transform, we did a bone rotation, and we're doing a layer transform. clips off a little bit at the end. So let's come here and we just move it away a little bit. There we go. Okay, and then you can just export your animation. Just File, Export Animation. This window appears. It gives you various options. We're not going to go into those right now. We're just going to use the default MP4. And this should match what you have down here as far as the last frame. But you can manually change. If for some reason you have a larger sequence and you want to just redraw one part of it, you can do that. And it rendered it that quickly. It's a very short animation with only a few points, but it rendered it that quickly. And you can set this to repeat. Okay. So I think that should do it for this tutorial. Again, very simplified reason why you'd use the various animation tools, but that's the basics, how it works. And if you're not familiar with Anime Studio, maybe this has helped you decide whether or not this is a program that's right for you. And I hope this was helpful. If you want to see more of these tutorials, just let me know. Leave a like and a comment and say, hey, can you show me how to animate this? And we'll see if we can get that done for you. Anyways, have a good day.